Hi everyone, and welcome back to season 3 of Commerce Meets Law, a podcast we talk about various commercial topics and how they interact with the legal profession. This season is all about people who have broken barriers and stereotypes, who've not just stepped outside the box, but shown that these boxes simply do not exist. This week, I am super excited to share my conversation with Emily Gill, co-founder and CEO of LEVRA, an organization committed to elevating the human skills of Gen Z workers. The company's immersive training powered by AI and virtual reality strengthens communication, collaboration, and productivity in the workplace, creating real-world results for businesses. I'll link the website in the description down below, so definitely do check it out. Prior to starting LEVRA, Emily spent 7 years as a banking and finance lawyer at Clifford Chance, advising major financial institutions and companies, which is where our conversation begins. In this episode, we discuss where Emily's interest in law began and why she decided to pursue life as a commercial lawyer, what she learned from her time at Clifford Chance, and the factors that led to her deciding into pivoting into the world of business, how the idea of LEVRA came about, and why she's so passionate about making an impact in the lives of the current and the future workforce, and finally her future goals for LEVRA and how her definition of success in terms of her career has changed since leaving the legal profession. This conversation was filled with insights from Emily on life as a lawyer, entrepreneur, and navigating the professional world, which I'm certain you'll enjoy just as much as I did. Just before we get into the conversation, I'd really appreciate if you could give the podcast a follow and a rating on Spotify, as it really helps Commerce Meets Law reach more listeners. Without further ado, I really hope you enjoyed this conversation, and I'll see you right at the end. Hi Emily, and welcome to Commerce Meets Law. Really excited to have you on season 3 of the podcast. Before we start any conversation, we always have an icebreaker. And the question is, in your opinion, what is your superpower?
I think one of my superpowers is the ability to meet people where they are. And something I learned through training to be a certified coach is that actually it's not really about you in any conversation. It's always about the individual on the other side. So the ability to understand their energy, that they may have woken up on the wrong side of the bed and they may not be necessarily moody because of you, but there may have been situations or something happening in the background. So I think one of my superpowers is definitely the ability to kind of meet an individual where they are at that point in time in that conversation.
And would you say that's something that you've always had, or is that something you've sort of cultivated over the course of your kind of professional life?
Yeah, definitely something I've cultivated. I don't think I really understood it before. And I think certainly when you're in the working world, you feel like you need to present yourself in a certain way. You feel like you need to show up in a certain light. And the pressure is on you. And as I mentioned, when I went through my training to be a certified coach, the emphasis is actually really on the individual that you're having the conversation with. So it becomes less about you and what are you bringing to the table, but actually what is it? How can you make the other person feel? And there's this brilliant quote, and I'm not going to get it right, but it's something along the lines of, people will always forget what you say, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And I try to think about that when I'm having a conversation with an individual. It's how can you make them feel a certain way? And it doesn't necessarily need to be uplifted or empowered, whatever that feeling is, but just remember there is another human on the other side of that conversation, and the feeling that you leave them with is so important.
Definitely. And I think, this is foreshadowing what we're going to be talking about. But I think those soft skills and that feeling of empathy and understanding people is stuff that you don't really learn at university or even at school, but it's stuff that you sort of have to develop as a professional, regardless of whether you're working in the law or any other profession for that matter. And I think that, we're going to talk a lot more about it once we obviously talk about what you are currently doing. Before we get to that, though, I want to talk a little bit about your academic background background and your life as a lawyer before we talk all about LEVRA. So can you tell me a little bit about sort of your university journey and when you first developed that interest in law and wanted to pursue it as a path?
Of course, very happy to share. So I started off doing actually my undergraduate in politics whilst I was at Bristol University. I think I'd done a placement with a QC, so a barrister, during some work experience at school. So I had an idea of the legal sector, but I don't think it was until I got to university and I started thinking about what I wanted to do. And I remember it was probably my sister that said to me, "Oh, have you thought about law?" And she'd been through all this graduate application process and she'd started working in a bank. And I was never numerically that literate. It was all numbers weren't my strong suit. So I thought, actually, what do I enjoy doing? I enjoy more the language side of things. So it was whilst at Bristol when I started thinking about, the legal route as a career. And I must say, I didn't know enough about it. I think I came to it particularly blind, and I don't know whether that's because I didn't do an undergraduate degree in law, so I was a little bit naive to what the legal sector was really about. But the sort of thoughts around maybe this is a career option started at university.
Hmm. And you ended up training at Clifford Chance, and some might think that from that point of not really knowing a lot about the law to getting a training contract in a Magic Circle firm is quite the journey. So I guess it's hard to summarize, but in a nutshell, can you tell us a little bit about when you first started those applications and when you thought that actually this is a place that you can see yourself?
Mm. So I must have started my applications in my second year of university,
Mm.
and it is challenging. It is a long, arduous process. I remember I had a spreadsheet which set out, I would just applied for vacation schemes initially. So I was applying for a summer vacation scheme at the end of my second year because I was a non-law university student. And I probably had a spreadsheet of about 52 names of law firms that offered vacation schemes. I knew exactly when their deadline was. I knew how to apply, a link to their profile. So I'd done a lot of research and really understanding about what a vacation scheme was and what the firms what the firms I wanted to apply to were. That being said, a little bit of a numbers game. And
Mm.
it wasn't a matter of me applying to Clifford Chance and getting a vacation scheme. I think it was one of the last applications I actually did, that and Freshfields, and they were the only ones that I got past the first round for. So I had a lot of rejections, a lot of emails saying, sadly, they tend to be anonymous and just say, we've had
Mm.
a very high intake of candidates and I'm sorry, but you're not one of the lucky ones, or something along those lines. And so it's a numbers game. It's about being well organized. It's about really thinking through what are the law firms that I want to apply for, because there's obviously a cross section of different firms that specialize in different areas of law. But I really took it as almost a little bit of an investigation project. Like, how am I going to tackle this big problem and how do I go about doing it? And it's worth disclosing that I didn't actually initially get the opportunity to do an interview for Clifford Chance. I
Mm.
didn't actually, sorry, let me think. I'm trying to remember how this worked. But I think you then get called to an assessment day. And I
Yeah.
got asked to go to an assessment day because someone had dropped out. And so someone had dropped out of the interview process. So they literally called me on Thursday. And I remember being in the library and they said, "We've got an assessment day tomorrow. Would you be able to join us?" And I said, yes. And that was I had less than 24 hours to get there, to get on the train back to London from Bristol. And I did the assessment day. And I actually ended up failing one of those verbal reasoning or non-verbal reasoning tests. I can't remember which one it was. I didn't know that obviously at the time. And it wasn't until later in the application stage of the process that I was actually told that I didn't. But I spent a long time following up in emails afterwards. Hello, it's Emily. Just wanted to find out how the assessment day went. Would love to chat to you further. And so I don't know whether if I hadn't been as enthusiastic and eager as I had been, whether I would have then been offered the opportunity for a vacation scheme. So for anyone that's listening and out there and thinking of applying, and this isn't just relevant to the legal sector. I think it's relevant to the whole job market. If you're applying for a job, it's not easy, right? There's so much competition out there. There is so many amazing candidates with brilliant CVs and credentials. How are you going to make yourself different? And a lot of that is you have to create your own luck. You have to be willing to jump on a train at last minute. You have to be willing to chase up that opportunity. People aren't just going to come to you and find you on LinkedIn and assume that you're the best person for the job.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important aspect that I think sometimes people forget of well, when you're one, especially with Magic Circle Farms, I think being one amongst so many different applicants, that there isn't that sort of element of showing that you are really eager for that and you really do want to be there, and like you say, luck sometimes can play such a role in that as well. In hindsight, looking back at that application process, is there anything that you think you would have changed about it, or anything that you would have done differently, perhaps to have had more success in that time?
You have to make yourself a person rather than just a number. So if you imagine yourself on the other side of the table, you're receiving 2,000, 3,000 applications for a vacation scheme or for a training contract. How do you become someone other than candidate 1963?
Yeah.
The more that you can do to build up a personal relationship with the people who are sitting in the admissions team, or develop a brand for yourself, or make yourself unique, and that doesn't need to be something that doesn't feel right to you. If you're amazing at tiddlywinks or ping pong, shout about that. Like, that is what makes you an individual. And I recently had someone come to me for advice, and she is absolutely brilliant, and she has her own beauty business company, and she managed to get a first in law at the same time, and she's applying for these legal applications, and she's like, I don't know what to say to make myself stand out. And I just started saying, like, talk to me, like, what's important about your life? And she started talking about, like, her amazing swimming career and the fact that she has this incredible beauty business which is generating revenue. And I was like, these are skills which you need as a lawyer. You don't necessarily need an amazing collection of academic records. It's actually the skills that prove to people that you are ambitious and hardworking and determined, and that you will go beyond what is just the normal person would do, and you do something different. If you're someone setting up a business, as you are, Shreya, you're developing your own podcast, like, for me, that's like, wow, that's really inspirational. You're doing something not everyone else is doing out there. So my advice would be to candidates or to individuals that are thinking again of applying to any job, like, what proves that you are doing something different and something unique and something that makes you, because that's really what the application is about, is finding individuals that are going to bring an extra bit of the magic to these firms.
Definitely. I think that's so key. And like you say, it's things that people shy away from talking about because they think it's not relevant. But I think that those are exactly things that are relevant, because most people who, when they come into, become trainees, don't necessarily have a wealth of legal experience, but they do have a lot of other experience which they can use then to become better lawyers. And I think that that's definitely, it makes, like you say, it makes you human. It makes you not just another candidate in the pool of candidates that graduate recruitment is looking at. And I guess translating that to when you then did start your training contract, can you talk to us a little bit about sort of what you enjoyed most about your training contract, and what perhaps you felt like were some gaps or some things that you were missing that you felt like weren't there in that process?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll start with the gaps, because I guess I always think about my failings first. But You're suddenly starting in the working world for the first time. Everything is new. You're trying to keep up with people and partners and senior associates that feel like they know everything. I think one of my biggest, maybe it's failings, but was starting and thinking everyone would have very high expectations of me, and hence not being willing to ask questions or ask for help or really be my natural curious self, because I was so
Yeah.
worried that I would be judged and people would think, oh, she's stupid and she doesn't know the answer. When in fact, part of the reason for doing a training contract is you're supposed to develop those skills and you're supposed to be learning, right? And I
Yeah.
think I missed potential learning opportunities because I thought I should know it all. And that really isn't the case. Like, people don't expect you to know everything, and it's more important to ask questions and put your hand up and say, actually, I don't know. This is new
Yeah.
to me. This is what I think might be the answer. Or could we put forward a piece of work and frame it in this way? Like, put forward a solution or a suggestion. Don't come with a blank canvas, but realize that you don't have to know it all, and it's okay not to know it all. What I loved about the training contract is it's an opportunity to grow and to learn. And
Mm.
every single day is different. And I think if you're an individual that enjoys being kept on their toes, enjoys a challenge, wants to learn from other people, it's a brilliant opportunity because you obviously get the chance to rotate through different seats. You might get an international secondment opportunity. So I did my international secondment in Singapore, went and lived there for a bit. So if you're the type of person that wants to be challenged and likes the idea of growing, developing new skills, learning, improving, I think the training contract is absolutely brilliant in offering those opportunities.
And I think that sort of that learning opportunity is something that people hear a lot about, but I think putting it into action, like you say, of not being then afraid to make those mistakes, because that's exactly, and that's part of how you're learning, I think is that balance to strike of, giving your best shot and putting all that research in, but also knowing that you can't possibly know those answers, because that's pretty much the point of the training contract and those 2 years. I guess at the end of that, you decided to qualify into banking and finance. So can you tell us a little bit about why you chose that seat in particular and sort of what attracted you to that seat for qualification?
Mm. I think it was definitely the people. It was a
Mm.
very big department at Clifford Chance. I felt like there would be lots of opportunities because of the size of the department. In all honesty, I didn't feel a particular affiliation with an area of law, and banking and finance was Clifford Chance's biggest department. I knew there was opportunities to potentially do a client secondment or go abroad or work with lots of different people. So for me, what was really important was firstly the people. I really liked the people that I had worked with, but also the opportunities to kind of move into different careers. And I wasn't totally sure at that point whether I would be a lawyer forever. It was, I wanted to continue learning, exploring, work with people I enjoyed too, and also that in an area that it wouldn't cut off my options. I think I was potentially looking at specific areas of law like tax or employment that may make another career change more challenging.
Hmm. And speaking of career changes, I guess it's a nice segue for us to talk about LEVRA and the career change that you did end up making. And I think before we get to that, you were at Clifford Chance for 7 years before you decided to make that decision. And I think that around about that time, particularly now, we hear a lot of people who have sort of, got to that junior slash mid or even senior associate level and are now thinking, right, what are my next steps? Am I going to go in-house? Am I wanting to go down the partner track or something else entirely? So thinking a little bit about, I guess, your reasoning, what kind of encouraged you to fully pursue a different career path as opposed to perhaps going in-house or still being in the legal profession, but perhaps just in a different role?
I think it was this gut feeling that I knew there was something else out there, and that if I just moved to an American law firm or in-house, that I wouldn't really be fulfilled. And I had an inclination that I wanted to create, and it sounds a bit American, but like a bigger impact. There was something out there that I wanted to do, and I wanted to like have my own thing, I think. And I just knew that I'd had enough experience of the legal sector that it wasn't going to fulfill me. And in all honesty, I don't think I was a brilliant lawyer. I didn't care enough about the really small details, even though I am a bit of a perfectionist and I work really, really hard. I don't think I cared enough about like how one specific clause would fit in with another clause and things that really, really matter when you get to a more senior level of being an associate. So it was a combination of like this niggle of there's something else out there for me. I want to create a bigger impact. I didn't know what it was, but I just knew that I wouldn't be fulfilled in the existing job. And I think also realizing that maybe I wasn't best suited for the legal sector as well, like being very honest with myself. And I think I knew that deep down pretty early, but really thinking about like, where are my strengths as an individual? I loved working with people. I loved the client side of things. I loved the other lawyers and the team that I worked in, but I didn't really love the work. And when you get to a stage in your career, you have to love what you do. At least I believe it's so important to enjoy what you do. Otherwise, you find yourself like Sunday night and not looking forward to the next day. And life's too short not to be to live in that way.
Absolutely. I guess the counter to that is, there's a lot of people who may be in that position, whether or not they're in the legal profession or another, where they think that there's something else out there for them, that this is not what they're passionate about. But perhaps what's holding them back is that idea of fear. A job like within the legal profession can be one which has job security per se, more so than setting up your own business. Did those, kind of thoughts ever come to you, and how did you sort of challenge them?
Oh my God, absolutely. I had so many family friends and people saying, "Oh, you're so stupid to leave a
Yeah.
legal career. Like, why would you do that? Why would you leave a Magic Circle law firm? Like, you don't know what's
Mm.
next? That's bonkers." So yeah, I totally had that, and people saying, "But you could be a partner one day, and you could earn millions and have a nice house," and even that, it didn't deter me. There's of course a fear. We all have this inner critic or this inner voice that says, that keeps us small, that keeps us within our comfort zone because we feel safe and we feel secure, and don't do anything outside of your box because actually something bad may happen. And that
Yeah.
I think is a biological thing. Like, we're wired from cave times to kind of be on high alert and not to take risks. Um, and what I'm trying to say is like all of those things came my way, and all of the criticisms or the suggestions I shouldn't leave from other people and from myself showed up. But I had to really think about like the future and where do I want to be in 5 years' time? Like, where do I see my life going in 5 years' time? And
Hmm.
am I really going to be happy if I'm in the same place that I am now? And I knew the answer to that was no. I knew I wouldn't be happy or fulfilled. So I think you have to think ahead and think about, and I'm not saying develop a 5 year plan or, I probably did do that at the time. I'm now a little bit more, give myself the freedom to think, but definitely think about like, is this a career that you want to do for the long haul? And what sacrifices are you willing to make? Because that's what it comes down to, is like, are you willing to sacrifice your salary, your pension, your health benefits, like the potential to buy a house, have a mortgage, support a family, whatever it is? That job safety is massive, and some people need that and some people want that, and that's brilliant. If that's for you, great. I knew that it wasn't for me and I wanted to take a risk. And so I think it's about asking yourself those hard questions. So if there's people listening that may be thinking about leaving a job or doing something different, like really sit with yourself and ask the questions like, what is it that you want from life? And do it in a mitigate the risks. I didn't just jump because I suddenly pulled the plug. I thought about it for 2, 3, maybe even 4 years' time. I put in place a strategy. I spent a long time developing other skill sets. I became a coach. I applied to do an MBA at Oxford. I would never have been just comfortable resigning, walking out the door, and not knowing what was next. I
Yeah.
knew what was next for the next year, which was I was going to do a master's. I was going to develop new skills. So if you're thinking about leaving or changing a career, put a plan in place. Don't just jump out the plane without a parachute. Get the parachute ready, set yourself up so you know what's next.
Absolutely. I think that, whether we see it on social media or everywhere around us, there's all that thing of people talking about, their successes, but not enough about what they did to get there and all the things like that. You say that either there was a trade-off, because there always is a trade-off. There's something that you're willing to give up in order to pursue something else. But also, in that sort of struggle, there are ways that you can mitigate it, of course, according to your situation and your, kind of things, the responsibilities that you have. And I think that realistic aspect and realistic look at it is so key. And talking a little bit about LEVRA and sort of the idea behind it, can you tell us a little bit about how you co-founded the business and sort of what the key USP is of the organization?
Of course. And in all honesty, I think the foundations of LEVRA came from a personal experience, still being a lawyer at Clifford Chance and
Mm,
seeing so many brilliant trainees and young adults starting at the firm and technically being amazing, coming from Cambridge and having
mm,
incredible credentials and CVs and LinkedIn profiles, and yet really struggling with the interpersonal skills, not knowing how to deal with senior staff, not knowing how to pick up the phone and call a client, not knowing how to resolve an issue because they hadn't asked a question at the right point in time. And I think it was whilst at Oxford, taking a step back and realizing that no one ever teaches you those skills. No one ever
yeah.
teaches you what we at LEVRA call human skills, the skills that make us human. And so, how are you expected to know them? Some people do pick them up because they've had a good background or a good education. Maybe they've been challenged at the family dinner table, but not everyone does. So, we're actually not giving talent the best opportunities to succeed in the workplace if we're not training them on how to collaborate or how to communicate effectively. So LEVRA was really born out of an experience I saw firsthand of Gen Z workers not always being given the skills that they need to thrive. And also a little bit of my coaching experience too. I suddenly realized there's so many people that want to feel empowered and want to feel more confident and yet don't know how to get there. And
Mm,
so I think there were various different strands that showed up, and my co-founder, who's called Bartek, who's an amazing person, and he'd had an accounting experience. He'd seen the same problem at Deloitte in South Africa where he had worked, and saw similarly smart young adults starting and working at Deloitte but lacking soft skills. And in this world of rapidly transforming technology and AI and all the rest of it, the skills that really matter in the workplace are the skills that make us human, the human skills.
And at LEVRA, then, how do you, kind of ensure that the clients do develop these soft skills? What are the sorts of resources and training that you provide them that allow them to develop this?
Yeah, great question. So we would break our product down into three parts. First part being our LEVRA human skills framework. So we have developed a framework based on the 7 core skills that an individual needs to be a strong, effective communicator. And as a result of this framework, we've developed a psychometric assessment tool. So before any learner starts a program with us, they undertake the psychometric assessment, and that measures their baseline human skills ability. So where are your strengths? Where are your weaknesses? Do you even know where your strengths are? Following that, the second part of our product is a learning platform, and that hosts a lot of short bite-size videos, content, podcasts, TikTok style interactive ways of learning, because of course our target audience is the Gen Z, Gen Z category, and that's how you all learn. It's not from sitting in 3-hour lectures or from an e-learning module. It's bite-sized material. And then the final piece of our offering is we deliver a lot of our training through virtual reality workplace scenarios. So what that means is you're actually giving an individual to practice these human skills, but in the psychologically safe environment of VR. So they can speak out the answers, they can practice developing a first impression or presentation skills or interview practice, but in this psychologically safe space.
That sounds brilliant. And in terms of clients, would you say that it's mostly sort of, people who are either applying or who are currently in work who are signing up, or would you say that it's also law firms who are signing up their trainees to join as well?
Yeah, good question. So we're B2B. That means we are a business and we sell to other businesses. So we
Mm.
do work with other law firms, and we sell our programs to the law firms who then deliver them to the trainees at that firm. So we largely work within the professional services sector with accountancy firms, insurance firms, legal firms, banks, and we deliver training programs to the large intakes of trainees, apprentices, graduates that start working at that firm. I think in a couple of years' time, and a part of our long-term expansion is to move and help individuals who are seeking employment. I'm a governor of a school in Lambeth, and it's a sixth form school, and I see so many 16 to 18-year-olds on the cusp of going out and thinking, what career do I want? And again, these skills that I've talked about are the ones that really matter. So how can we start tapping into schools and other ways to upskill individuals, maybe when they're 15 or 16, so you can start
Mhm.
cultivating these skills at an earlier stage in life?
And I guess someone who's listening, who's thinking about, your journey as a lawyer and is thinking, wow, this is really kind of transitioned from being a lawyer into, having a tech platform and teaching through technology. Would you say that, it was relevant for you to obtain those business skills and those tech skills to some extent, or do you think you could have still done what you're currently doing without having sort of that technical background?
I don't actually have a technical background, say, so I learned things on the go and I learned things whilst I'm doing them. And I think that's a big thing about business is you don't always have the answers and you don't always have the credentials that will make you a strong co-founder or CEO or whatever it is. And that almost becomes a bit obsolete, but I would say I'm someone who constantly wants to like grow and develop my skills and learn, and I'm curious and I want to improve. And I think those attributes are probably more important when you're thinking about starting your own business than necessarily the technical skills or
Yeah.
having the right expertise in an area, because so much in this day and age you can learn. If you have a passion and if you're ambitious, I truly believe you can make anything happen. And I would say it's probably more my determination that has
Yeah.
enabled me to maybe move careers rather than my technical abilities or my skill set.
I think that would be so relieved for people to hear who are maybe considering, who are currently in the law or another profession and are considering that career path. What might be stopping them is that they feel like, they don't have the technical skills. And I think particularly in business, if you're coming up with a product that's not yet on the market, it's very unlikely that, you can do a course which will teach you that, because, you're going to be learning, through that trial and error process.
Mm.
And I think, speaking of that, I guess one aspect of it, and developing something like this would also be the feedback that you get and then improving on that. So can you give us a little taste on maybe some feedback you've gotten, both positive and perhaps constructive and how you've used that in the business?
Yeah, great question. And feedback is like so critical. Again, I wish I asked for it more actually when I was a lawyer too. Like everyone tells you,
Mm.
ask for feedback when you finish a project. And I think there's still an element of like when you're asking for feedback, you're exposing yourself, right? You're suddenly vulnerable to potential criticism that may be coming your way. And if you can learn to ask for feedback frequently and early, it makes your life a lot easier, I would say.
Yeah.
And it's something, an ethos that really runs through what we do at LEVRA. You know, as a small, fast growing company, everything is changing very rapidly, very quickly. But the really important thing is the learners. Are they learning something? Do they feel more confident? What do they like about the virtual reality? What do they not? Is this an optimal length of time to be learning for 15 minutes? Would they prefer to have a session every other week or one new skills module a month? We're constantly seeking feedback, and it can be hard to stomach at times. Like sometimes it is really uncomfortable, and
Yeah.
not everyone's going to love what you do. Not everyone's going to. Some of our learners are like, oh, I don't like VR, you know, and you can't please everyone. But I think if you can look at feedback as something separate from yourself, because I think I used to be very confused and receive feedback as like almost a criticism of me as an individual or me as a human. Whereas if you can set that feedback aside and if you can ask about feedback on your work, it's about your work. It's not about you as a human or you not being a nice person, and it doesn't devalue who you are. And it's the same with the business. Like the more that you're willing to receive customer feedback, I think the better your product will be in the long term.
And then I think that, like you say, sometimes we get a bit scared. Perhaps we think it's going to hurt our ego or whatever, whether that's in a job or in a business, and fear feedback. But, if anything, that's going to help us get to the state that we want to be and, help us become more successful. And I think that, for a lot of people, predominantly who are listening, who are legal professionals, who want to be lawyers, there's a very clear path of what a successful career looks like in the law of, you make it to partner or you make it to a certain number in your salary per month or a certain number of clients. And I guess that path can be a bit more squiggly within business, within entrepreneurship. So for you, having worked 7 years as a lawyer and now as a business owner, what would you say is your definition of success and of having a successful career?
It's such a good question and something I think about often, but I think my concept of success has changed a lot. I think it used to be what is the position or what's the role that I'm in? How much am I earning? But I realize that that is so confused with what society wants us to believe success is. And we see it and we read about it, and this person is earning this amount of money and in this position. And it seems to be, and it was definitely something I strove towards. That was like what it was for me. It was like
Yeah.
earning a big paycheck, working at a reputable firm, good name on my CV. Everyone will think I'm brilliant as a result of having this job. Now, for me, success is about helping others change their lives and improve and get better. It's not totally related to me anymore. It's actually about how can I help other people?
Yeah.
And so my idea of success has changed in that what is the most amount of impact that I can create as an individual? And is there one person that I may be able to help feel more confident today? And it's not just about me. And I think I realized I derive a lot from helping others. And so for me, the success is how big can we make LEVRA? How many young adults' lives can we impact? How many people can feel more empowered or uplifted as a result of LEVRA's training? So the concept of success is really around the real world impact of improving young adults and how they feel within a workplace.
And I think that, when you start making your purpose not just for yourself but for other people. I think that is so fulfilling, whether that's in your professional or your personal life. And I guess going from that macro to the micro element, can you tell us a little bit about what your day in the life looks like as a CEO at LEVRA, and perhaps how that is a bit different to what people assume a Clifford Chance lawyer is doing on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, it it's an interesting one because as a Clifford Chance lawyer, you're going to, well, at least pre-COVID days, I was going to the same room on the same 25th floor in the same
Yeah.
office, day in, day out. You become very attached to the routine, and I loved it at the time actually. Like your gym routine, you're getting up at a certain time, doing everything in the same day. Whereas when you're running your own business, it's so very different. Like it's
Mm.
every day is different. I've been on a call this morning and we've talked about investment decks. I have spoken to an external partner. I've got a call this afternoon on website. I am then speaking to another customer. So every day is different. This week, if I look back at my diary, I was back at my old school talking about human skills at that school. I did a demo session at the Financial Times offices. So it really is, every day is different. And I think that's one of the biggest things, is prioritizing what's really important and being very organized and laser focused on what you need to deliver, because otherwise it's very easy to get caught in lots of different directions, especially when you're a small team and you're still growing. So
Yeah.
that ability to prioritize is essential. But these are all skills that I learned as a lawyer. And I think that's a really important thing to note, is that my legal experience stood me in such good stead for becoming a co-founder of a business. You learn to deal in high pressure situations, you learn to prioritize, you learn to deal with challenging individuals. All of these skills that you develop on the job are transferable to business. And I actually wish more lawyers would start their own businesses, because I think they have the perfect skill set for it.
And another thing that's talked a lot about within commercial law is the working hours. And a lot of people say, especially on social media, that when you become your own boss, that means that you can work less, and then the opposing side does actually end up working more because it's something you're passionate about. So where would you say you fall on this line of, would you say you worked more as a CC lawyer, or would you say you work more now?
I probably work more now, sadly. I think probably more conscious of the hours that you work
Hmm.
when you're a CC lawyer, because you bill per hour and you're
Yeah.
judged per hour, and
Yeah.
you have to give in your workflows per hour. But I mean, when it's your own business, you're always working, right? You're up at 5 o'clock, you don't get to bed till 11:30. But I think the main difference is it doesn't feel like work. Like,
Mm.
even if my husband's watching TV and I'm on my computer, I get excited by it rather than potentially dreading it. And I think that's another question individuals should think about when they're considering a career in law, or a transition, or whatever it is. Like, do I feel more filled up as a result of doing what I'm doing, or does it drain me? And
Yeah.
that question of like being drained or fulfilled in what you do, I think, is a really important one. So yeah, I definitely work more hours. I work weekends and mornings and nights, and your mind's never off, but I feel so much more alive as a result of the work that I'm doing.
What you've achieved in just the last 2 years is absolutely incredible. And hopefully you can come back on a couple more years' time and tell us about all the
Yes,
successes. But
please.
for for now, what would you say, I guess, owing back to that, maybe that 5-year plan, what would you say are your future goals for LEVRA? Where would you like to see it go next?
I think it goes back to the impact piece of how many learners can we really scale our product and deliver that to.
Yeah.
Next year we're building out a whole new platform, and it's going to be incorporating AI and personalized learning programs and adaptive ways of learning and gamified features. And I think the mission behind that is really to appeal and to deliver our human skills training to as many people as possible. So the mission
Mm.
is definitely to do with how can we take this to 100 million young adults globally, and that's the mission that we're on. How can we make people feel more confident and communicate better? And that is a numbers game for us too.
That sounds like an amazing, amazing mission, and I'm no doubt that you'll definitely be there in the next couple of years. We always end on a rapid fire, so I've got 3 questions for you to finish us off. So the first question is, what is the best advice you've ever received?
Best advice. If not you, then who? If not now, then when?
Amazing. We've not had that one yet, which I'm really surprised about, but that's such a good one. I love it. The second one is, if you could relive one day of your life, what would it be? Or which one would it be?
Gosh. I think probably the birth of my daughter, maybe.
Yeah.
Even though it ended up in an emergency cesarean, but I think by that point I was so out of it with emotions and hormones that I think that, yeah. I think welcoming another human onto the earth is probably a pretty special thing to do. So yeah, that moment.
And the final question is, what does your ideal weekend consist of?
Oh, good question. You know what? I'm getting a little bit old, so sadly, it's not so much about the partying and the going out, but probably something along the lines of Saturday morning, waking up, a walk, a coffee, an outdoor market of some sort. I love Borough Market in London, so some sort of outdoor foodie market, a really good long lunch somewhere. Being outside, definitely, being around friends and family, doing enough that you feel like busy, but also I love a Saturday night in, and it probably sounds like I'm a granny already, but being at home, cooking, having early night, a big hot bath, a gin and tonic. So really the simple things. I don't think it's anything that is particularly glam, whereas maybe you would have asked me 5 years ago and it would have been a trip to Paris for the weekend on the Eurostar, whereas now I think it's like being at home with a nice chicken stew and a drink or something like that.
I love that. I think we're only in final year, and our house has already got to that point of preferring nights in rather than going out. So yeah, I think it definitely rolls in earlier every year.
Yeah, the transition
But
happens.
yeah. But on that note, Emily, thank you so much for coming on Commerce Meets Law today. I think that, this season's all about people who have stepped outside the box, and I think you are a perfect example of that. And I hope that, like you mentioned during the conversation, that more lawyers do set up businesses, more professionals do think about entrepreneurship, because, yeah, I think those skills can be so well used in business. So thank you for giving us your time today.
Of course, and a big congratulations to you as well, Shreya, for doing what you're doing, because you've set up your own business and you're helping to share the word of other people. So I think it's really inspirational, this commitment that you've made to the podcast, and the fact that you're already on season 3 is unbelievable. So really excited to see what happens with you, and thank you for inviting me.
And on that note, thank you so much for listening to this episode, and a massive shout out to Emily for coming on the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please do let me know by emailing commercemeetslaw@gmail.com or with a DM on Instagram at commercemeetslaw. And for extra summer content, do check out the Commerce Meets Law YouTube channel and our TikTok. For now, take care, goodbye, and I'll see you very soon on the next episode.